Coming into our full 360 breath. As you inhale, feel the rib cage expand front, side, and back. Fully exhaling. Couple more breaths like that. Breathing into the entire rib cage, especially those side and back ribs. Exhaling either through the nose or the mouth. All right, we'll keep this position on our backs. If the knees are not bent yet, go ahead and bring the feet to the mat, but keep the sacrum right above the tailbone on the ground. We're gonna wake up the feet, so the first thing I want you to do is keep pressing into the ball of the foot, but see if you can just lift and maybe spread the toes. Now lower the toes down, press into the toes and the balls of the feet, lift the heels. Lower down, press into the balls of the feet, lift the toes, lower the toes, push into the balls of the feet and the big toes, lift the heels. So keep alternating, lifting the toes and lifting the heels. A couple things I want you to think about is what's happening in the pelvis. So especially as you lift the heels, are we lifting the low back away from the ground? We want to keep the sacrum the same. So our triple S stays the same. As you start to wake up the feet, work the ankles, getting into the calves, and maybe already into the hamstrings. So this is going to help us with our balance, waking up those feet. Now bring the feet down. We'll take a breath in. As you exhale, draw the pelvic points in. Imagine the front ribs knitting toward each other. As you pick up the right foot, right knee comes over the right hip. Keep the sacrum the same. And then step it down. Inhale. Exhale, draw the pelvic points in. Draw those front ribs in. Keep the sacrum down as you pick up the left foot, knee over the hip. So we're alternating our hip flexion, but we're using the core. So inhale when the feet are down. Exhale, really think about engaging the core as you flex one hip at a time. Now you can stick with this, or as you exhale and pick up one foot, take either hand to the thigh and let's resist. Try to push it away, but don't let it move. So adding that extra challenge is an option. Exhaling as you lift the foot, keep pulling the belly down to the ground. Maybe we add that resistance of hand into the thigh, thigh into the hand. Couple more times, whatever you're doing, sync it with the breath. Keep the sacrum heavy on the ground so we're not lifting the low back up. Both feet come down, recheck that triple S. So the back of the skull, the shoulder blades, and the sacrum are on the ground. Push the ground away with your feet. Use your glutes to lift into a low bridge. We're staying low enough in our bridge that our shoulder blades and probably even our lowest ribs are still on the ground. Let's feel the pelvic points draw in. So we're really using the glutes to stabilize so we don't wiggle the pelvis side to side. Let's alternate lifting one heel at a time. Continuing to wake up the feet, the back line of the body, so the calves, the hamstrings, the glutes. And the goal is to not be rocking the hips side to side, but to hold that pelvis still, using the glutes and the core as we continue to wake up the feet and strengthen the ankles. With this alternating heel lift in our bridge, getting those feet and legs ready to help us find our balance. Bring both of the feet down, hold your bridge, right palm up. Take your left fingers and pull those right fingers back to stretch the wrist. Now, if you ever need to just lower down from bridge and take a pause and then lift back up, that's great. Breathe into the side and back ribs. Switch hands, left palm up, right fingers pull back. Keep the tailbone long, so your tailbone's reaching toward the heels. Hands can come to the thighs or the hips, wherever they land. And as you exhale, lower down one vertebra at a time. Your sacrum right above the tailbone is going to come down very last. And then recheck that triple S. Back of the skull, shoulder blades and sacrum. Hands will come behind the head, elbows in like you're trying to touch your elbows to your forehead. Take a breath in while the head is down. Exhale, lift up off your shoulder blades. Lean your skull back into your hands so you're not pulling on the neck. And feel that same knitting in of the front ribs, like you're trying to come in toward each other a little bit more. Inhale to lower down. Exhale, stay heavy in the sacrum as you lift up, so we're not lifting the low back away from the ground. Feel that knitting in of the front ribs. Lean your head back into your hands, but stay off your shoulder blades. Inhale to lower. Exhale, lift up. Feel your front ribs pull down to the ground as you lift off the shoulder blades. Now keep the sacrum the same, so we're not arching the low back. Extend the right leg in line with the left knee. Let's point the toes, plantar flexing the ankle, and then flex the foot. Pull the toes back, dorsiflexing the ankle. Step that right foot back down. Inhale and lower. Exhale, lift up. Feel the pelvic points draw in. Lean your head back. Left leg extends in line with the right knee. Keep the low back the same. Point the toes. Flex the foot. Pull the toes back. Bring it back to your starting position. Step it down. Inhale and lower. Exhale, lift up. Feel the front ribs knit in. Feel the pelvic points draw in. Right leg extends. Point the toes. Flex the foot. Back to your starting position. Step that right foot down. Inhale and lower. One more. Exhale, lift up. Lean your head back. Zipper that whole front body up from the pubic bone to the sternum. Left leg extends. Point the toes. Flex the foot. Back to your starting position. Step it down. Inhale and lower down. Release the hands. We'll pick up the right foot. You can have the knee bent. You can extend the leg up, straight-ish. And let's point and flex here, getting a little bit more into that ankle mobility. So we need the ankle to be able to both plantar and dorsiflex, even just to walk and to squat. And to do all these things we need to do. Now let's circle the ankle a couple times, both ways. And now we'll bend the knee, bring your hands to the pelvis, the front of the hips, hold it still as we circle this right hip. Both directions with that right hip joint. Now the sacrum is staying still, right above the tailbone. It's not rocking side to side. Flex your right foot, cross it over, figure four. Checking in here that we still got the back of the skull, the shoulder blades, the sacrum. Right hand can come to the right thigh, or an option is if you want to pick up your left foot right now, take your right hands to this right foot and just give it a little bit of a massage to help wake up the feet. So that starts to wake up the proprioceptors in our feet, which means we're going to be able to send faster messages up to the brain, and that can help us stay balanced. Good, release it down. So both feet are on the mat, recheck that triple S. Pick up the left foot, bend her straight as much as you need, point and flex that left foot. So get that movement as much as you can in both directions, both pointing the toes and then flexing the foot. So we're taking that ankle through its full range of flexion and extension, and then circle both ways. Bend the knee, hands to the front of the pelvis. Let's circle within that left hip joint. So these are going to be small circles so that the low back isn't rocking side to side. We're just moving the top of that left thigh bone. Flex your left foot, cross it over. Your choice for figure four, as long as you can keep that triple S down. So if it feels good to have left hand gently push the left thigh away, you could do that. You could pick up the right foot to bring the left foot closer and just do a little very gentle wake up at the bottom of the feet. It's good for that plantar fascia at the bottom. Breathing into the ribs, front, side, and back. Let's release it down, hug both knees in. If it feels good, rock side to side. You could also rock up and down or make little circles around the sacrum. When you're ready, we'll come into a seated position. Checking in however you're sitting, that we've got the ears right over the shoulders, shoulders over the rib cage, and the rib cage over the pelvis. Arms will come forward. Let's spread the fingers nice and wide. Start at your pinkies. Try to just lower the pinkies down. Now just the fourth finger, so we're trying to move one finger at a time. Once you get to the fist, your thumbs are going to cross in front to make a fist. Pull those knuckles back in actively. So we're pulling the knuckles back into toward the forearms as much as we can. And then circle both ways. We're going to do that one more time. Getting our wrists ready to put some weight on them. So palms forward, wrist extension. One finger at a time, lowers down into a fist. Thumbs will cross in front whenever you get there. Knuckles pull back into wrist flexion. Keep pulling back, pulling back. And then circle both ways. Good. You can shake it out or just roll them. We're heading to quadruped. So coming to hands and knees. Shoulders are right over your wrist. Walk the knees in a little bit closer than you think into your quadruped so that your hips are over your knees and you can easily get shoulders right over the wrist. We'll start by looking forward. Now keep the head at that height, but bring the chin toward the throat. So we're lengthening the back of the neck and not letting the ears drop below the shoulders. So starting with our neutral neck, neutral scapula, slightly draw those shoulder blades in. Now draw the pelvic points in like you could balance something there. Hold the neutral spine just as it is as we slide the right toes back. So right toes are starting on the ground. We're in three-legged quadruped. Make sure we haven't arched the low back here. So tailbone's reaching toward that right heel. Give that right glute a little squeeze as you float the right leg off the ground. So right foot is flexed, toes are facing the ground. Keep them facing the ground as we slightly move the leg to the right. So we're abducting this right hip out to the right. Keep your toes facing the ground and then bring it back behind you. Right leg moves maybe an inch or two to the right. It's a small movement. Bring it back. Keep those toes facing the ground. Keep going, whatever your pace is. We're really working that outer right hip. So the action of hip abduction is when the limb is moving away from midline. So we're working that outer right hip and glute. That's going to help us for our single leg balances. Slide that right knee back into quadruped. Check that we haven't arched the back or started rounding, but we are still in that neutral. Chin is slightly toward the throat. Left toes slide back, three-legged quadruped. Give that left glute a little squeeze as you float the toes up. Make sure we haven't arched the low back here. So really think outer left hip. And we're going to keep the toes facing down, move the leg slightly to the left. Hip abduction, bring it back. Strong in the arms. Abduct out to the left. It might be 1 inch. It's really small. Keep the toes facing the ground. If the toes start to turn out to the side, that means the hip is probably also externally rotating. And right now, we just want to focus on the action of abducting away and then bringing it back. Keep the head from dropping. And slide it back into quadruped. Let's take a quick child's pose, sit the hips back any amount. Any option with the arms, you could always roll the wrist or giving it a little bit of a break before we get back onto our hands. And when we're in child's pose with the toes tucked under, we're getting some plantar flexion in the ankle. So the opposite of that dorsiflexion we were doing earlier. Coming back to quadruped, you could also be on your fist if you want to stay off the wrist a little bit more. We're just going to cat-cow. So as you inhale, arch your back. Lift the chest. Exhale, push the ground away. Shoulder blades really spread apart as we round the back. Inhale, arching the back. That's extending the spine. Exhale to round, flexing the spine. Moving at any pace that feels good. Getting as much movement as you can in both directions. If you're on your fist, come back up onto the hands and we'll tuck the toes. Keep this much weight in the hands as you lift the hips, down dog. If your feet are really far at the back of the mat, walk the knees forward quite a bit so that you can bend the knees and really push into the hands. Feel your hip creases lift up, right where the thigh meets the hip, and feel your front ribs lift up. Holding our down dog, nice and active in the arms. Let's pedal the feet out. So you can bend one knee even more as you try to stretch the other heel down. Getting the ankles moving, getting a little stretch into the calves, maybe up into the hamstrings. But arms stay really active. So we're not sinking the chest through the arms. Big bend in both knees. Keep lifting the hip creases up. Walk your hands back towards your feet until we can lower the heels down. And we're in our happy squat. So this is triple flexion of the ankles, the knees, and the hips. You could always have blocks under the hands. We're going to push into the feet like you're trying to leave your footprints into the mat. Give the glutes a little squeeze as you rise up. So pushing the ground away, lifting up, checking in that we have ears over the shoulders, over the ribs, over the pelvis. We'll do a tandem walk forward, and we're going to try it a couple times. So we're going to heel toe our way forward, trying to walk in a really narrow line as if we were walking on a tightrope. And can you do this? and look forward to start. So we're just heel toe walking the length of our mat, and then we're going to reverse it. Can we heel toe walk backwards? Looking forward. So there's so many things. We've got our ankles working. We've got our hips working to stabilize as we shift weight. Now this time as we walk it forward, you could try closing your eyes even just for a second. You could always have the arms out a little bit wider. And just notice how hard it is once we start challenging those systems of balance. So our eyes closed, that affects our vision, which affects our balance. Good, we're gonna walk it forward one more time and then you can pause there. Checking in with that stacked posture, ribs over the pelvis. Let's reach the arms forward and up. Lift those shoulder blades up like you're trying to get your armpits up to your ears. Tailbone is reaching down. Push into the big toes. Lift the heels. Carefully lower down. You can always have a softness in the knees. Push into the big toes. Lift the heels. Lower down with strength and control. Lift the heels. Lower down. Now keep this much weight in your whole foot. Big toe, pinky toe, and heel. As you sit the hips back, big bend in the knees, bent knee forward fold. Until the hands come down, we'll head back to quadruped. Shoulders over your wrist. Knees in nice and snug toward the hands. Feel that neutral neck, shoulder blade, and pelvis. Tuck the toes. Now you can even just stay with the toes tucked under. That might be a big enough stretch for the bottoms of the feet or the toes. You could sit the hips back as an option for a bigger stretch, especially into those big toes. That's into some big toe extension. You could also tuck the toes, cover the knees, hovering quadruped. But don't let those shoulder blades spread apart. Keep your neutral neck, neutral shoulder blades. Lower down. Good. From here, you can take child's pose for a couple breaths. You can take cat-cow. You could tuck your toes and head to down dog for a couple breaths. Whatever feels good. You can always add some extra movement for the feet, the toes, the ankles, the calves, really getting our lower limb ready for balance. If you're not in down dog, let's tuck the toes, lift up just for a moment as we transition back into that happy squat. So hips nice and high. We're keeping the spine long, walking the hands back until we can get the heels down. Finding again that triple flexion. Push into the feet like you're pushing the ground away as you rise up. Good. Tandem walk again. Let's start with just the head forward. So as much as you can, we're heel to walking forward. You can have things to hold on to. You can have your arms out. Make it work for you. Same thing as you walk backwards. Now feel that the hips are working. The outer hip and glutes are working so that we don't sit into the hips every time we walk. Now, as you come forward this time, our option to make it more challenging is to turn the head side to side. So this is challenging our vestibular system, which is our inner ear, our spatial awareness or orientation. So this is another way we can challenge our balance without closing our eyes, but it definitely still makes it harder. One more time, walking forward. Good, keep that tightrope walk. Good, top of the mat. Reach the arms forward and up. Shoulder blades lift. Push into the big toes, lift the heels. Lower them with strength, so we're not slamming down. Lift the heels, push into the big toes. Lower down with control. One more time. Push into the big toes, lift the heels. Lower down, feel the full imprint of your feet as you sit the hips back. All the way until we can touch the ground. So huge bend in the knees for quadruped. Toes will tuck under. Your option here, if toes tucked under is a big stretch, stick with this. Maybe we sit the hips back, getting more into that ankle mobility. Maybe we tuck the toes and hover. So do your option. They're all good for the feet and the ankles. Lower the knees. Let's come back to quadruped. If you're not there, you can untuck the toes. Right foot will step forward. Left knee slides into a 90-90 lunge, lifting up. So you've got the feeling of a broom taped behind our back. Our pubic bone is lifting toward the belly button, and we've got a little squeeze in that left glute. You can have hands at the pelvis. You could do hands on the right thigh. Let's push into the right big toe, lift the heel any amount, and lower down. So with the hand on the thigh, it's either to help you balance or it can add a little bit of challenge if you push down a little bit. So adding a little bit of resistance for that right ankle and heel and calf to have to work a little bit harder. Just a gentle resistance. Make sure that left glute stays firm. Good, hands come down, three-legged quadruped. Right leg extend back. Pause in here, align that neutral spine. Picture that broom taped behind you. Give that right glute a little squeeze as you float the right foot off the ground. We'll do some hip extensions here. So really think right glute, right glute. That's what's gonna lift this right leg just a touch and then lower it down. So they're just tiny pulses, but make sure that doesn't move the low back. The low back stays still, the pelvis stays still. We're using this right glute to extend the right hip. Holding that neutral neck, chin slightly toward the throat. If you want to challenge your balance more, take those left fingertips, reach them forward toward the front of the mat. So that's going to challenge our core stability a little bit more, which is great for balance. And we're working the outer left hip, that bottom knee, so that that left hip's not moving around right now. It's really stable, which will help us prep for our single leg movements. Slide it back into quadruped. Let's cat-cow a little bit. Moving the spine, getting the hips moving. Other side, left foot steps forward. Slide that right knee in for our 90-90 lunge. Lift up, ears over the shoulders, over the ribs, over the pelvis. Right glute nice and firm. Hands can stay at the pelvis or come to this left thigh. Let's lift and lower the left heel. So it doesn't matter how high the heel lifts. Work on pushing into that left big toe. Keep the pubic bone feeling like it's zippering up toward the belly button. Tailbone reaching down. Working the left calf and ankle. Right hip is working to stabilize the pelvis so it doesn't wiggle around. Hands come down, three-legged quadruped. Left leg back. You can start with the toes on the ground. Now feel that neutral spine. Soften the chest down a little bit, lift the front of the throat. Use the left glute to float the toes off the ground. Let's start those hip extension pulses. So you can really think left glute, especially if you're feeling it just in the hamstring at the back of the thigh. That's helping out, but we do want to use the glute too. So if you could balance, you could always put your right hand at that left glute, give it a little tap, or just keep your hand there. That's the muscle right underneath your hand that we want to use, or have those right fingertips reaching forward. Let's make sure we're not moving through the low back. Holding still there. Slide that left knee back into quadruped, your choice. You can cat-cow, you can take a child's pose, you could tuck the toes and head to a down dog. Meet in down dog just as a transition so that we can walk the hands back toward the feet, happy squat. Push into your heels, big toes and pinky toes as you rise up, give the glutes a little squeeze on your way up. Tandem walk forward. So first time, let's just do looking forward. Keep that tightrope feeling, nice narrow stance, walking forward and back. And the next time you walk forward and back, add your challenge. You can stay with exactly this. You can maybe try the eyes closed. You could try turning the head, but let's try to add one of the challenges to our system, either our vision or our vestibular system. Good, really feel the weight shift into one foot at a time. Meet at the front of your mat when you walk it forward. Check that neutral spine, arms reach forward and up. Lift the shoulder blades, push into the big toes, lift the heels. Knees could always stay soft. Lower with control, so slow that lower down. Lift, push into the big toes. Slowly lower down using the calves. Push into the big toes, lift. Slowly lower down. Good. Push into the full feet like you're leaving your footprint. Sit the hips back, like we're folding in half by bending the knees, quadruped. Toes tuck under, your choice. Stick with quadruped toes tucked. Maybe sit the hips back if that feels good. Maybe we hover. You could always choose something different every time. Draw those pelvic points in if you're in that hovering quadruped. Lower the knees if you're hovering. We'll meet back in quadruped. Step the right foot forward. Low lunge, left knee slides in. Let's try to tuck those left toes under this time. So getting that same stretch at the bottom of the left foot. Great for that plantar fascia. Let's feel that the tailbone is reaching down. Shoulders over the wrist. Now hands behind the head. You can have the elbows in as much as it feels good or out, but wherever they are, don't pop those ribs forward. So keep our triple S, ribs right over the pelvis. Really tighten that left glute. So that left glute really got to stabilize and be side bend to the right. Come back up. And now side bend to the left. That one's a little bit trickier for balance. And come back up. So we're side bending both ways. Challenging our stability, especially of that left hip. So we really have to work outer left hip so that we're not rolling around there. And then feel like your left thigh bone is trying to lift up into the pelvis instead of that right knee just pushing into the ground. Heading to modified side plank, left hand comes down, left knee slides in, right foot steps back. You could always take the right hand and cuff that left shoulder and really hold it stable. You need a little bit of support there, or just have that feeling of your hand cuffing that left shoulder. So you don't want that left shoulder rolling around. You want to hold it still. Right hand can stay at that outer right hip. We'll pick the right foot up, maybe, or you can stay with the foot down. Now maybe we try to tap the right toes forward a little bit toward the side of the mat, and then back to where you started, a little tap. Maybe the toes tap forward. And back. Make sure that left shoulder is not wiggling around. And then we're also working this left hip and glute, that bottom leg, to stabilize through the bottom hip so we're not wiggling around there. This is all going to help us transition into more single leg standing balances. Good, let's lower to quadruped, hands and knees. Switching sides, left foot steps forward. Right knee slides in, toes tuck under. Lift up, check in. We've got our triple S. Hands behind the head. Right glute stays really firm as we side bend both ways. So we're really just side bending in the ribs. None of the movement is happening here through the hips. We're super stable there. So we're engaging our core, and our core is helping us side bend and not just collapse toward the floor. Lifting this right thigh bone up into the pelvis, trying to stay as light as we can on that right knee. Modified side plank, right hand under the shoulder, slide the right knee in, left foot steps back. Modified side plank, you could always take the left hand, cuff that right shoulder. We'll hold that right shoulder still, work that right glute. Hands at the hip, maybe we add those taps forward and back. Hold the pelvis still. Picture zippering the pubic bone up toward the belly button. Challenging the stability of that right shoulder and shoulder blade, and the right hip, right side of the pelvis. Lower to quadruped. Your choice, wherever you want to end up. Child's pose, cat cow, or downward dog. Meet in down dog. We'll walk the hands back one last time for happy squat until you can keep the heels, big toes, pinky toes down, spine as long as you push the ground away to stand up. Tandem walk forward. Now both times or the whole time, let's see if we can add something to challenge our balance. Maybe if you had the hands out before, maybe we try it with the hands down. Maybe we still have our hand holding onto something to help us. You can have the eyes closed. You could be turning the head. It's so hard when we take away one of those systems or challenge one of those systems. When you come to the top of the mat, we're gonna pause there. Step your right foot back into a mini high lunge. So we're stepping it back maybe a foot, and we'll do a little gait push off like we would if we were walking or running. So we're gonna rock back onto this right heel. Try to get that right heel down and then lift the left toes. Maybe it's the ball of the foot down, maybe it's all the way. And then we'll rock forward, weight in that left foot, as if we're pushing off the right toes, maybe we do push off. And then we rock back onto the right foot, lift the left toes, rock it forward, push off those right toes. So we're gonna keep rocking forward and back. Can you do this and check that the pelvis is not tipping with you? So from this neutral position, can we get this mobility in the ankle? So we're getting that dorsiflexion on the right side as we rock back, and then plantar flexion as we push off. Same thing with that left foot. So we're getting both feet. Good. Switch feet, left foot back, mini high lunge, and let's try that rock back. So we're rocking onto the left heel this time, and then rock forward as if you're pushing off the left toes. And really feel that push come from the big toe. Your ankles might be making a little bit of noise like mine. You've got pelvis neutral, so don't let it tip forward or back. Good, step it forward, face either side of the mat. We're gonna come to a squat, so we'll externally rotate the hips, so toes are turned out a little bit. Bend the knees, make sure knees and toes feel comfortably facing the same direction. Check the pelvis so we're not overarching the low back, tailbones reaching down. And we're gonna hold here. You can pulse, pressing into the feet. You can try to pulse and maybe lift one heel at a time. You could pulse and lift both heels. You could try to close your eyes. If you need to have the hands somewhere on the body, go ahead. So eyes closed is going to be a lot more challenging. Even if you're just pulsing without lifting a heel, it might feel a little bit harder to balance. So let's use the support of everything we've got, our hips and our glutes, our strong ankles and toes, our core. Good, straighten, step wherever you want to step, and we're going to do a little balance. Moving balance. So let's have hands on the pelvis, right on the sides, and just kind of hold those hands in place. We're going to abduct the right hip. So right leg moves to the right. Don't let the right side of the pelvis hike up. And then bring it down. Flex the hip, lifting the thigh up any amount. Bring it back down. It's going to hover, or you can touch it back down. Abduct the right hip, working that outer hip, and then bring it up. So our right hip is moving. We are using a lot of muscles in that right leg to abduct and then to flex, but we're also really working the stabilizer side of our left hip. So we're working almost the same muscles on this side as this side, but one side's just standing and stabilizing. Good, let's switch. Recheck, triple S, hands to the pelvis, abduct the left hip. Don't let the side of the hip hike up, and then flex. Lift it up. Abduct without the pelvis changing. Bring it back up. And the whole time, think about your body weight being in that left foot. So evenly pushing through that big toe, heel, and right foot, big toe, pinky toe, and heel of that right foot. Really supporting with that right outer hip and glute so that we can move the left hip and hopefully keep our balance. Good, step it down. Let's shake out or roll. You can stretch out like a little pony. You can come to the tops of the feet if that feels good. But let's just release a little bit of that tension. We worked the feet and the ankles a lot. And we'll head back to quadruped. Hands and knees, do whatever feels good. Cat-cow, child's pose, circle it, whatever you need. And we'll come into a seated position and close the eyes. Finishing by just taking a moment to thank yourself for your practice today. Sending one grateful thought out into the universe.